thank you for that, Nick. Now let me turn, as I say, to two politicians, Mark Reckless, Conservative MP, former economist himself, and Stephen Greenhalgh, who is the leader of the Conservative-controlled Hammersmith and Fulham Council, which has the highest property prices overall in the country. And I imagine, Mr. Greenhalgh, you wouldn't be madly keen on raising taxes and then paying them across to the Treasury.
Not madly keen. I'd be dead against it. I mean, we have actually the fourth highest property prices in the country, and a lot of the houses that would fall into the 1 million or 2 million plus brackets are owned by ordinary people still. I mean, this was in many cases, if you look at houses on the Peterborough estate, this is part of public housing, under right to buy, picked up, and often a long-standing family home. So this is not a way to catch the wealthy. It's a way to clobber people often on relatively modest incomes. They may have assets that are incredibly high, but not necessarily the incomes that match that.
Do you think it's fair that somebody in a 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 million pound house should be paying the same as somebody in a 320,000
Well, it's not just a question of fairness. I mean, we also have to look at the practicalities of all this. Implementing this kind of scheme is going to be hugely expensive. I'm told at 2005 prices, just to do the revaluation exercise that's needed is going to cost 200 million, or more than 200 million.
You'd get that back, wouldn't you? I was talking about fairness.
Yeah, well, in the first instance, it's about what's practical and about raising money. But if you're spending £250 million just doing the exercise that's the first stage of introducing this, that's certainly a massive cost to government that you've got to consider.
Mark Reckless, do you think it's fair?
Well, I've been campaigning on two areas in particular, and I'm glad to hear from Nick Robinson that George Osborne will be dealing with a stamp duty avoidance. But the other area I think is really important to address is currently there is a capital gains tax exemption for foreign residents. So if you are living overseas, or still worse, someone who's lived here, earned lots of money, but then goes overseas to avoid the tax, you don't actually have to pay the capital gains tax that everyone else has to pay on everything except their primary residence. So what I want to see is a capital gains tax withholding tax to ensure that these companies, but also rich people from overseas, have to pay the capital gains tax that everyone else does.
But that is relatively small beer compared with this business of people paying in very large, very expensive houses, even very large but very expensive houses, paying the same tax as people in much more modest houses. Is that fair, and should it be changed?
As an economist, I think there is a strong argument.
But as a politician?
And also as a politician, I think there is a strong argument at the top end for shifting the balance of taxation from income tax, where the 50p tax rate gets very little revenue, and I fear drives lots of people offshore, and I think reducing that would help kickstart the economy. But I don't think there'd be much to pay for. But I think politically, if we're going to do that, we probably do have to do something at the top end in terms of...
Right, so what? Increase the number of bands. At the moment we've got, how many bands we've got? How many we've got in Amazon? 8, because you got more than that in Wales, and there are some variations. But nonetheless, you think you should add to that number of bands.
And that would be one way of doing it. But I do think you can raise substantial amounts of money from stamp duty avoidance, but still more from the capital gains tax exemption. It's really important to do that.
You say you agree with that?
I agree with stamp duty land.
Yeah, but you don't agree with adding to the number of bands.
The problem is that what is this hugely wealthy asset that people own that should be taxed more? Is it at £2 million, or is it, as Nick Robinson was saying, £20 million? I mean, if we're talking...
Start with £2 million. Let's say £2 million.
£2 million affects 100,000 households in Britain. Those households are not necessarily extremely wealthy, John.
But they're wealthier probably than people in 320,000 houses.
Yeah, possibly. But you have to do an extremely extensive and expensive exercise to determine whether those are unmodernised houses, modernised houses, to be able to determine that, whether they've been bought recently. And this is and at the moment we start off with an exercise that was done in 1991 that shoved houses into particular bands. It was above £320,000 at 1991 prices, that's in band H. And it's very hard to know what those houses are worth now. That's going to be an intrusive, expensive, costly way of raising money. I think stamp duty avoidance is far more sensible.
Yeah, but we do revalue houses all the
time.
Well,
I think we should do a revaluation exercise, but if we want to do that, why did this government pledge not to introduce revaluation, not to introduce rebanding? Why did the Labour government not introduce it? Why have we got rid of the database that holds the data to do that? If we want to do this, I understand that, then set about making the steps to do it. But everything needed to do this in practical terms has been removed. Simply not possible.
And the fact is, Mark Reckless, it won't be done because it would be politically very unpopular, wouldn't it?
Well, the fact is we're in coalition. I would like to see the 50 pence tax rate dealt with. I want as much as the Lib Dems do to take the lowest paid out of tax. We have a child benefit issue we need to deal with. Economically, politically, we need to raise money for that, and at the moment we have some of the lowest taxed, highest value property in the world, and I think there is a case for raising some more money, particularly the two areas I gave, from that area in order to cut taxes elsewhere.
Mark Reckless, Stephen Greenhalgh, thank you both very much.